What's going on, everybody? Hey, listen, before we continue in this episode, have you checked to see if you've subscribed yet? You need to subscribe. Come on, if you like these videos and you're enjoying what you're watching, then it's about time that you go ahead and subscribe. Maybe you haven't noticed yet. Check now. Did you? No? All right, go ahead, hit that notification button, subscribe. It helps YouTube to know that you like our content. All right, see you on the next one. Peace.
The points in time in Grace's life when she deserved to have both of her parents there. So whether it was the parent-teacher conference I mentioned, or on the side of the soccer field, or at a school event, we were both there. We were both there, standing next to each other, sitting next to each other. That's what she deserved, is to look up from wherever she was in whatever environment and see both of her parents there smiling at her. That is what she deserved. And now, in terms of the day-to-day, we lived close by where we could, drop her off at each other's homes over the course of time until she could drive herself. And those interactions were, healthy and positive. And one of the things that I try to counsel couples that are going through divorce is your child is not the one to communicate between you and your ex-spouse. They are not the ones to say, hey, tell dad this, or hey, tell mom this. That's for you to communicate with each other. Like, they're not meant to be that conduit. And so, these days with email, with text, there's lots of ways you can communicate. It doesn't always have to be via phone. But what I would do is I actually kept a running list of things I needed to talk to my ex-husband about. And then when it got to be, unless it was like real, timely things that we needed to, sort through in a moment. And then once I had some, I'd text him and say, hey, do you have 15 minutes? Let's just run through the list. And we go through it and, just kind of work through whatever it is that we need to discuss. And it was respectful, and it was always in the spirit of what was best for Grace. And then we'd go on our way, and we were living our own respective lives and own respective careers and relationships and everything. But it was that point of connection was about her and making decisions and having those discussions we needed to have. So it was very conscious. But I said earlier, this takes effort. It does. It is not necessarily the natural inclination. When you've decided you no longer want to be married to this individual. The challenge is, if you have had children, you are going to be connected. Going back to your point about connectivity, you are still connected to them for a lifetime. And so, what do you want that day-to-day connection or week-to-week connection to look like, so that it's not? I always say that divorce can feel like a scarlet letter, but it's an action. You got divorced, right? But do you want the negativity and that kind of negative cloud to follow you through the rest of your life? That's a choice. That I fundamentally believe that's a choice that you can make about this action that you decided to go through and what you do on the other end of it. And so it was just a very conscious choice we made to not have that be that negative cloud that followed us for any of us, for my ex-husband, for myself, for Grace. And, as Grace grew up, she would see her friends' parents going through divorce, and she'd come home and we'd sit down. She's like, Mom, it just doesn't have to be that way. Because she'd see, the negative divorces I grew up with. And I said, Grace, I know it doesn't have to be that way. And she goes, well, just why? So it was a lot for her, because she would see how we were handling it, but she was seeing other examples of how other families were handling it that weren't necessarily in keeping with how we had approached it. And she could just see the stark difference. So it was really interesting to hear, again, her reflections.
That's powerful. Grace is an amazing individual.
She is.
You and your ex-husband have done a magnificent job in developing her.
Thank you. We're very proud of it, Joel. I think, again, given what we did to her life, I say at age 7, there's a lot of ways that she could have looked back and reflected on what we did, but I think we've all come out of it. She has an amazingly strong relationship with her dad. She and I are very close, and so I think it's really. And actually, my ex-husband and I took her to college and helped her move into her freshman dorm, and then he and I went to dinner that night and sat down and said, you know what, we did this. We got her here. And And that was a moment. And in fairness, we'd only had one other dinner in the 12 years that we'd been divorced. But that was a moment to go and sit and say, this is what we did. And to celebrate that milestone together, because we launched her into the world.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Have you seen, what is it, Cheaper by the Dozen, I think?
The
newest one?
I haven't seen it, no. Is there a moment?
But all of it. I feel like what you're talking about is in the basis of that movie, because the movie is all about, two divorced individuals who come together and create this amazing relationship.
Oh, interesting. Oh, I'll have to watch it. I have not.
You'll have to watch it.
Okay, I'll put it on my watch list. I'll put it on my watch list. I love it.
Yes. Well, because the other part is that those that were divorced are not out of their life, and watching how they interact is exactly what you're talking about. And I don't want to spoil it for you.
Okay. I'll definitely put it on the list to watch.
I think you'll like it. I think you'll like it.
Appreciate the reco.
Absolutely. And I think that you said, we were both there, for Grace, standing next to each other, sitting next to each other, soccer games, whatever. That's powerful, right? That's real powerful. And the type of this as a lesson, and everyone out there that's listening, this lesson that Sarah just gave right here. And the next thing that I want to quote her on was, keep a running list of what you and your spouse need to talk about. Imperative. Yeah. And this is like, if I were going to go into a marriage now with what I know, I've been married now for 24 years.
Amazing.
And communication is extremely important, but having the conscious mind to actually formulate a plan of how we will discuss the things that are going on in our life can make heads and tails on how long that relationship stays together.
Absolutely, Joel. And you know what? If you think about it, when you're married, that list, you might ping each other, throughout the day. Oh, this and that and this and that, because you're in constant contact. But when you're divorced, you chose not to be with that person. You don't necessarily want to have constant contact with that person. And so that's why I think to think about, putting some structure around when you need to and how you do it so that it works for both of you versus, that list could have been a daily or a couple times a day ping to my ex-husband all the things I want to talk about. I'm like, but does he need that? Do I want that? So that was, again, very conscious approach that we took, and it worked for us. It may not work for everyone. And again, the timely nature of things, the things that we needed to say, hey, switch on the pickup time, or the soccer games move to another field. I mean, those things you do, but the things that are a bit more of the longer conversations probably could wait till when you're both also in the right mindset to have those.
Ooh. All right, because that rolls right into my next thought on that, the mindset piece of it. Because what I've learned is that in a marriage, sometimes we are bombarding the other individual with these different things, not the running list, not like, hey, can you pick up milk on the way home because I need that for what I'm cooking, or my meeting ran over, can you pick up so and so. But like, there are certain things where maybe you got upset about something, or maybe something that was said hit you the wrong way, and it's all of a sudden like, we need to talk. 5 minutes later, we need to talk. 5 minutes later, we need to talk. Hey, I told you we need to talk. Hey, are you going to answer the... And all of a sudden it's like, hold on, calm down. I'm at work. Exactly. You're gonna get me fired if I get elevated at work. They're gonna send me home. EAPs are a big thing. I'm gonna be seeing a counselor, a psychologist. I'm not gonna want to talk to you after this.
Yeah, absolutely. And so to your point earlier, a lot of the approaches we took could work in just the day-to-day of managing our relationships that are intact. But absolutely, I think it's about how we consciously engage with each other, and when topics are meant to be addressed. And in life, there's a lot of emotion, Joel. There's emotions are part of us being human. But as I say, in a divorce situation, and I think there's things to learn from this, there's times when your emotions are high and you need to decide, how you show up with those emotions, or whether you need to put them aside for a little bit until you can actually, manage those emotions in the way that they need to. And I talk about in my book the concept of developing a compartmentalization muscle. And what this really means, and I kind of joke, I do Pilates, which builds your core muscle. And I always say that the one thing that I think all of us need as humans is a strong compartmentalization muscle. Because what that allows you to do is, in those moments and in those times when you might have high emotion on a topic, is deciding, is now the time to really engage in that topic, or do I need to put it aside for now? It's not that I'm saying to bury it, because you need to address it, but put it aside where you can have the right type of conversation in the right moment, and hopefully end up in the right space because of what you wanted to raise to your spouse or your partner. Or and that's, again, was something I learned through the course of my divorce, that how important that compartmentalization muscle was for me to have, and to be able to manage things based on, when it was the right time to raise certain things. So
powerful, and you just continue to build up on that also, so it's like having the appropriate mindset, and then also, how you show up matters.
Yes.
And I think that, because sometimes inside of a marriage, the way we show up, we feel as if it doesn't matter. I can just show up any which way I want to today, because you know what? He already put a ring on it, or because I already put a ring on her. She owes me this, or he owes me that, or I don't care anymore. And that makes a difference on whether or not that relationship is going to last, because how you show up matters.
It does. I think you should never take for granted that it is important how you show up in any relationship at any given time. And whether it's with your spouse, with your children, same thing with your children. You can say, well, they're my kids, they get to see it all. They do, but do they need to see it all? I'm not sure they do. There's emotions that I'm not sure children are meant to see or meant to experience as young children. That's not for them to have to take on. But that's a choice, right? That's a choice, and it takes building a muscle, and that's why I talk about it as a muscle. It's about building a muscle and consciously saying, this is not healthy for my children, or not healthy for my spouse to have that emotion shared at this time because of where I am in my own headspace.
It's powerful. I mean, this is not just about divorce, everybody. This is about being a good mom, being a good dad. This is about being a responsible parent, a responsible spouse. This is about raising a family. That's what this conversation is truly about.
Yeah.
Your book is The Mom's Guide to a Good Divorce, but really, from the content that you continue to give, this is like how to responsibly keep a family together.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the perspective, Joel. I would agree with you. And the other thing is that there was a moment where Grace and I were on a spring break about 2 years after our divorce, and we were sitting there and we were looking at a family that had a mom and a dad and a sister and a brother, and they were at dinner, and we were sitting there, just the two of us. And she looked over and she goes, I think that's a real family. And I said to her, why is that? She's like, well, there's a mom and a dad and a sister and a brother. And I said, I go, well, we're a family. She goes, well, we can't be a family. I don't, and this was, she goes, my dad's not here and I don't have a brother. So, well, that's not happening. But it was a moment. And I said, well, Grace, and I tried to kind of explain away. So, but I did go back, and this therapist I mentioned earlier that she had been seeing, I texted him, and she wasn't seeing him at that point, but I explained the situation. I said, this is how I handled it. And he said, you know what? You shouldn't have told her she was wrong, because that's her mental model of a family. But she will learn over the course of time that these days there's different structures of what families look like. And you and your ex-husband are still providing her that structure, but just in a different way. And so I think, again, in society, if you look at the various structures of families, and to your point about cheaper by the dozen, like there's so many different ways that families are structured these days, and whether it's a single parent household or two newly divorced parents that bring children together, or a family unit where the parents have stayed married. I mean, there's so many different structures, but having children understand that whatever structure they're in, we're going to make it the healthiest, happiest structure it can be for them, so that they don't look back and say, gosh, I didn't have, to what you were just saying, a true family that I grew up in. It didn't feel that way. So that was another piece that I took away, again, in this journey that we went on. And I agree with you that the concept of family can still live, but just in different forms.
I've got a couple more questions for you. Do you have more time?
I'm happy to, yes.
All right. So we may have to divide this up into 2 segments.
Okay.
I feel like it's because you're so authentic.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, it's obvious that you are thoughtful of the words that you say, that you're very considerate of what has happened, and that you are looking for benefit for not just yourself, but for the multitudes of people that will enjoy your book, as well as are growing a family or going through some type of struggle, roadblock that may lead them into a divorce. This book, if they were to get this, they may not even need to get a divorce, honestly, because if they were to apply all the techniques that you are listing, they may not even need to get a divorce. I mean, that's one of my questions. If you had this book before things got really bad, do you think that you would have still gotten a divorce?
It's an interesting question. In our situation, hard to say. I'd have to really think about that, Joel. It's a great question. I think that what you're indicating, though, is true, that for couples where the strain of the parenting and the juggling act of co-parenting and raising this family together is the stressor, and is causing potentially undue stress in a relationship. I do think having this book in advance of that and reflecting on some of these things and thinking about how you're approaching co-parenting together in the same household could, again, alleviate some of those stressors and have people reflect on what's best. So I could see where that would be the case. I'm not quite sure in my situation whether that would have been the case, but I can definitely see where it would have been the case.
Okay, fair enough. Because you didn't actually tell me what it was that led you all down that road, and I'm okay.
We don't talk about that. Yeah,
we don't talk about Bruno. Do you? That's a reference. I'm showing my age, I guess. There's a movie called, I think it's Ella something. Anna, what is that movie called? Ella something. Ella El Encanto. Ella Encanto, I believe.
Okay.
But anyway, there's this one individual who I guess everyone decided that he was Bruno. Bruno was the one that was separated from the family. And nobody knows where Bruno is because he's the dark cloud, the black sheep, etc. And they're like, we don't talk about Bruno. And Ella's like, well, where's Bruno? Why did Bruno do this? What? And they're like, we don't talk about Bruno. And they made an entire song up.
Oh, did they?
Like, we don't talk about Bruno. They're singing the song. And so that's it. That's your Bruno right there. We don't talk about Bruno.
Yeah, we don't talk about that.
I love it. And you are sweet. You're very, very sweet.
Thank you.
Okay. So here's the next one then. Would you actually consider your ex, yourself, and Grace, and I don't know if you've remarried. I should have asked you that, or he remarried. But would you all consider that as part of your family?
Absolutely. Neither of us have remarried, but we have significant others in our respective lives. But I would say we are absolutely family. And in fairness, like for Grace's birthdays, my ex-husband would come over and he'd be there for the birthday party. And for graduation, we had a graduation dinner with my parents. And sadly, his parents are no longer with us, but we all had graduation dinner together. And so, yeah, we did the things that families would do to celebrate the moments in life where Grace, was there. And we've, been through things we needed to talk through over the course of her life relative to health, health considerations and things that we were leaning on each other to think through those things together. So absolutely, I think we do have a family dynamic, and again, across two households, and with each of us showing up for what we need to show up with Grace as the focus. Absolutely.
This is powerful, right? Because it's to say, hey, listen, that it's not that there's life after. It's almost like divorce is death, right?
Right.
You mentioned it as being the scarlet letter, right?
I got to tell you, thank you for sharing. I have a story that speaks to that, and you'll laugh when you just said that. When I first, 5 years after my divorce, probably maybe 4 years after my divorce, I was at a business dinner in Latin America, and I had a colleague of mine at dinner who turned to me and goes, "Sarah, you're so happy." And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "But you're divorced." And I said to him, I go, "Getting divorced is not a death sentence." I said, "My ex-husband and I decided to no longer be married to each other." And he said, "I'm happy, Grace is happy, my ex-husband's happy." I go, "We're all happy." And ironically, at that point, I said, I had helped a number of my friends who had decided at that point to go through divorces, and they'd asked me to help them. And I said to him, I go, "My friends have been encouraging me to write a book about how we approach this." And he said, "You really should." I said, "Well, I don't consider myself a writer." And so he goes, "I really think he goes, given how happy you are," he goes, I do think you have something to share." So the next morning I went, got on my plane, and I opened my laptop, and I wrote my first line that said, "This book is written by a girl who never ever thought she would get a divorce, who got a divorce, and what she learned along the way." And that's the first page of my book. And so that's what started my whole book journey, was that dinner. But the concept of it's not death, and what you just said, there's a whole life. If you have to go this route, if divorce is the choice that you need to make with your spouse, that this is not going to be the path for the two of you, and you have children, there's absolutely a way to do it where you all can be happy over the course of time. Divorce is hard. I'm not at all trying to downplay how hard divorce is on a family, on children. Like it is an absolute hard thing to go through, but there's a way to do it where you're minimizing the long-term negative impact of what that divorce will mean to you, your children, and your ex-spouse. And that's fundamentally what I'm wanting society to understand and to appreciate, because we do have such a mental model in the society about divorce. So when you say a good divorce, people are skeptical, right? They're skeptical. And I have people that say good divorce, like, how can that be possible? And some people, Joel, will say to me, "You know what? I know one other couple that I would say had a good divorce." And when they tell me that, I say, "That's awesome. I'm just really sad that it's just one other couple." Like, for all those people that go through divorce, we literally go through, there's 2 million couples a year that go through divorce in the US. One other couple.
Which goes back to some of the points that we were discussing earlier, about having this understanding of the partnership, because sometimes we're jumping into this relationship based off of, love, and I'm not downplaying love. Don't get me wrong, because I believe 100% in love. Love should be able to weather every single storm. And then there's this idea of, love-hate relationships, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's like oil and water. They really don't mix. So if it is a love-hate relationship, it's probably teetering on some emotional imbalance or some mindset that is just abstract, but when it comes down to it, you need to have commitment, you need to have communication, you need to have compassion, you need to have compromise.
Yes.
These are 4 things that going into a relationship can change the dynamics of that relationship. And that's before children even enter into the vicinity. Absolutely. Because I believe that many times people, they fall into this quote unquote love, and it's non-founded. developing a relationship with somebody creates a foundation, you know? And sometimes we as individuals, we don't have a good foundation. Our grounds are messy. We
Yeah.
need to uproot a whole bunch of garbage, clean out the stones and the rocks in our own grounds before we go and try to merge our land with somebody else's and then produce something together.
I 1,000% agree, Joel. And I do think that many relationships don't have that foundation to begin with. And so then if you do add children and produce another life and bring that life into a unstable foundation, it's a challenge, right? It's a challenge. And it's I think it's such a big decision to have children, right? And I think in society we just assume everyone's going to do it and assume, and it's just like, oh gosh, please pause before you decide. If you're not in a healthy relationship that you don't think is, now you can be a single parent, and I'm a single parent, I have been, and I think single parents can absolutely do it, but that's you're signing up for something different, right?
Yeah.
And what you thought you were signing up for. And so I think there are a lot of relationships out there that should probably press pause, because some people think that having a child will make those foundations better, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I don't know about that. I think you might want to make sure your foundations are pretty solid before you add all that comes with the amazing journey. But also, there's a lot of learning that comes with being a parent,
Yes. Well spoken. Well said. So we have a question from Anna.
Yes.
And her question is this: regarding your parents, about you and your ex-husband being divorced, how did they react to the fact of you two divorcing?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, because I was raised Catholic, and so that was a big decision. But when I, sat down with my parents and explained that we were going to do this, they were very supportive. Their biggest concern was how Grace was going to, she was their first grandchild. And so it was all about how is she going to kind of fare through this process. But they were very supportive. But they continued to have a relationship with my ex-husband. And as I said, he would come to dinner and they would still see him. And so it was a healthy interaction, even though we decided to make this change in our lives.
Wow.
And I give them a ton of credit for that, because that's not always an easy thing when you decided for someone no longer to be in a marriage. But my parents were amazingly supportive and always were there as Grace's grandparents and as my parents, and really just were amazing.
Your parents have done a wonderful job with you.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm very fortunate to have the two parents I have. They're amazing people. So
yeah,
they are. They are.
Were there conversations that you had with them prior to going through, but prior to, like in preparation?
As I made the decision, as we made the decision, I talked through it with them and discussed what this decision meant, because I did realize I was the first in my family to go through divorce. And again, given the strong Catholic ties and what that means in the Catholic Church, it was definitely a big decision. And I wanted them to understand and kind of talk through it with me so that they could, again, wrap their own heads around this decision, because I realized it would be a lot to take in. So we did have conversation.
Are you, I don't know if I asked you this, but do you have siblings?
I do have two younger brothers, who are both happily married and have kids, and are great uncles and their wives are amazing aunts to Grace, and we're a very close-knit family. And so, yes, I'm very fortunate to have just a really supportive and loving family who's been with us along this journey as well, and has handled it with grace and support and love. And so I couldn't ask for a better family.
Oh, that's beautiful. I'm almost very cautious to ask you this next question, but I feel like I feel like the way that you'll answer it will be so. I just think it'll be a beautiful answer. I don't know. I have this feeling.
Okay.
If there was something that, especially speaking to women or even men for that matter, if there was something that a man or a woman was going through in their marriage as an absolute or near close to an absolute, what would that thing be that would be advisable of a divorce?
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, anything where someone's in physical danger and doesn't feel like they're physically and or mentally safe, I think are grounds for, drawing that line and saying this isn't healthy for me. It's not healthy for my children to be in an environment where we're not physically or mentally safe, emotionally safe. I should say it's mental and emotional. So those are pretty hard lines, I'd say. I think when there's other abuse in the house, which maybe to the spouse is has addiction issues, things of that sign that may not be, again, a situation you might want to stay, but it may be hard. It may be not a healthy environment for you and your children to be in that situation. And I think, the concept of infidelity is one that can be debated, because there's the concept of forgiveness and whether or not that's something that can be worked through over the course of time. So I think that's one that depends on the situation and whether the level of trust can be rebuilt, where you can continue on in a relationship after those situations have occurred or have come to light. So I think there's different considerations, and to your point earlier about the love-hate concept. I mean, some people grow apart, Joel, right? And they don't grow together, they grow apart. And what may have been a really strong relationship a long time ago, where you are as individuals now, the compatibility is not there, and you're not happy together. It's just not kind of goes back to your friend's comment about, couples that he sees that are been together for so long, but they don't actually, they're not happy. I do think in life, there's a point where happiness, your foundational, fundamental happiness in life is a very important thing to reflect on. And I do think commitment's important and staying committed. But if your day-to-day happiness is something that is never going to really come to fruition because of that relationship, then I think you at least need to press pause and really reflect on what it would take for you to be happy and what that looks like, whether it's in that relationship or making a change.
Beautifully stated again. Well done. Well done. I feel that, and I agree with that. I think that, going back to your point of keeping a running list, when people start to grow apart, I believe that we as people begin to recognize that at some point in time. And it should be a call to action.
Yes.
To start the discussion, because it's true. We grow, we develop, and I'm in this developmental stage of extreme freedom. I desire freedom and liberty at all costs. And that is what I offer to everyone that I see through my coaching experience and my family. But the problem with that, if there is a problem or a different aspect of it, is that when you allow for yourself to be free, then it's very liberating. But when you allow for someone else that you're in a relationship to be free, all of a sudden you're giving them the rights that they absolutely deserve, but to do something that you disagree with.
Right.
And also to formulate the mindset to have a conversation with you about those disagreements or agreements, and to find a way to walk it together. Yeah. And if they don't desire to do that, then it puts you in a very precarious position.
It does.
So freedom is extremely liberating, but it always comes with a price.
And lots of considerations. Absolutely. Lots of considerations.
Yeah. I truly thank you for all of your wisdom and, absolutely beautiful. And I think that for some of the people that you have spoken with over the time, maybe you ought to tell them there's a scripture in the book of Ephesians, the 2nd chapter, the 8th verse. Yes. And the next time, this one?
No, I don't know it by heart, so I'm happy. But I'll definitely check it out.
So next time somebody tells you, says, you're happily unmarried, or you're divorced and still happy, you're like, hey, listen, by grace are we saved. I
love it. Actually, beautifully said, and that's a great way of coming back when people say that to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Because Grace has been your grace. She has
Oh,
been your grace, and everything that has been done in her name
yes.
and for her, and
Yeah.
has been also for you and for your ex-husband, and
Yeah.
has caused a great impact on many people, to the point where it's caused an impact on me and on Anna, because you're here with us on It Starts With Me. So I think that is amazing.
Well, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Well, thank you so much for having me today. Truly appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. How can people get in contact with you?
So they can write to me at sarah@gooddivorce.guide. And my website is www.gooddivorce.guide. And that's where you can find little bit more about me, about the book. And oh, thank you. You're pulling it up right now. And so it's all there. And you can link right into accessing the book on Amazon as well from the site.
There you are.
Here I
This
am.
is written by a girl who never, ever thought she would get a divorce, who ended up getting a divorce, and what she learned along the way. Yeah, yeah. You're a very special individual, and I'm very grateful to have you on our show. Thank
Oh,
you so much.
thank you so much, Joel. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Absolutely. Is there any final thoughts that you'd like to interject?
No, I just really appreciate the reflections you had, and I just want people that are struggling with this decision to know you. And to your point, you invest as much as you can in saving that marriage and doing what you can, especially when children are involved. But if you do decide you need to go down the path of divorce, I fundamentally believe there's a way to do it where you can be happy, your children can be happy, your ex-spouse can be happy, and you can not have that negative cloud that many people have following them, and you can actually have a lot of sun and a lot of bright lights in your life if you do it a certain way.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you. Have a great day. Take care.
You too. Everyone, that was Sarah Armstrong, and she is smart, she is intelligent, she is brilliant, she is beautiful, she is authentic, I believe she is very trustworthy. I just feel that. And her integrity is intact. She is honest, and she has delivered a book that I think can truly help you if you are going through the divorce or have had a divorce. And I also believe that it can help you if you're in the midst of a marriage and you're concerned about how to develop your relationship and the relationship that you have with your children. I think that her book is probably a very good read, just judging by the character of the author. She is amazing. And some of the things that she left with us is it starts with your relationship early on. That's one of the things that she had mentioned. And she also mentioned that in, taking care of her child Grace, that her and her ex, after the divorce, they were both there for Grace. And I think that that's a very powerful thing that, those that are divorced now ought to consider. So whether your child is, playing soccer, basketball, whatever, they were both there, and they weren't fighting, but they were enjoying their child together. And that's a beautiful sentiment and story. As much as it starts with you, it starts with me. I hope you take that with you. Peace.